I know. So I was 2 miles at the time on the shoot. Oh, yes. And I was at USC, but I was on my research. I had my I know. So that is the okay. So I always joke that so I have the enormous family, and then my husband's family is like enormous. So they're lucky. Now they're just so yeah, so it was my immediate family, just my parents and my brother, but my mother, my dad. Oh wow! Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, we're done. Okay. That's fascinating. You better tell the psychologist that story. Okay. Yeah, right. It goes in patterns, right? I was a little worried. I'm like, yeah, are people going to show up already? Right. Okay. At least my first Julie, how are you? Thank you for you're doing it. You're doing amazing. I'm so excited. And then Hurry for getting even like right into it. You were? Well, I don't want to interrupt that. It looks like a conversation. Wow, it's well in the brain. Awesome. Great. So, figure people are people. So notice there's no clock. I'll kind of try my own. I did see that. Hi, oh, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, sort of like text one back.
Oh, I love that. Oh gosh, we all need that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I need one of those.
So I'm looking forward to talk how this works. So people are
Good.
interested to see what's hopefully a little bit of feedback from us out of this too. So interesting.
I think we're going to give spoken from the.
I won't use the microphone, but you get everyone's attention to go ahead and get seated.
And good morning. Thank you everyone for making it and the rain, snow, whatever it is. I'm Lydia Slant, I'm the co-chair of the Health and Wellness Forum, and I also am vice president. I'm happy to be here today, and thank you to AT for hosting us in space. I would love to introduce Dr. Julia Dajani. Yes, close enough. Close enough. Say it again though. Dajani. But as long, I mean, my husband barely knows my last name. So she is a founder of NeuroHealth Partners, an organization that really focuses on healthy living and sustainable behavior change through the study of neuroscience. So a fascinating area for all of us who are humans, or with humans, on how to really create sustainable change. And in our organizations as leaders, how do we provide employees the best resources, performance, motivation, and recognition to really bring the best out of the brain. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say today. I think how long are we gonna go?
I think we have about like 70-ish minutes, so I kind of built in time for, I'd love to hear from you guys, what's resonating, what kind of challenges you have, so.
Well, go ahead and come on. Thank you very much.
Is it better? You guys hear me better this way?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I was saying normally the podiums are so close to the comfort zone, and this one's so sweet, but not limited to walk. Okay. All right, so thank you so much for that introduction and for inviting me to be here with you today. I thought that I wanted to kind of start with a little bit more about what I hope I can offer you. So NeuroHealth Partners is an organization dedicated to the neuroscience of sustainable behavioral change and high performance. We draw heavily on the sciences of psychology and neuroscience, and this is largely because I myself am a clinical psychologist, and I'm a specialized training in the brain. So my technical title is a neuropsychologist. And for many years, I have worked with human and human behavior in very intense contexts. So my expertise is trauma. I've done a lot of work with combat veterans and torture survivors. I've worked in very high-stakes political contexts, so at the White House, on several presidential campaigns. I've also treated patients now for years, assessing their brains and examining how their brains affect their behavior. And I've also done research for years. So brain research, typically EEG, fMRI, and then systems-based research. And I mention all of this because I have fundamentally come to believe that behavior cannot be understood outside of the system in which it lives, right? And so I am very committed to sort of exploring and keeping a pulse on that continuum of human behavior from the most micro and individual to the most macro and organizational. So I say that because I continue to work with individual clients. That work is very important to me and informs me in a lot of ways. So I see clients twice a week here in the loop. And then the other days, I spend thinking about organizations and working with organizations like yours, trying to help organizations think about how behavior unfolds based on the takeaway. So what I'm offering you today is not a talk on the philosophy of management. It's more fundamental than that. Today is about the biology of behavior. And what I think is beautiful about the biology of behavior is that regardless of your organization type, regardless of your sort of style as a manager, I have seen how neuroscience can serve you as a leader and help your organization. So without much further ado, let's kind of jump into it. So today is on the neuroscience of total rewards. And I think even more specifically, the neuroscience of total rewards to really think about sustainable employee engagement. So just kind of right off the dome here, I'd love to hear from people in the audience, what kind of challenges or what kind of things are you thinking about on this total rewards landscape? Oh, come on, this presentation is so much better when it's not just me up here blabbering on and on. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, absolutely. So how does it facilitate a culture of listening that permeates the organization? Any other things that people are just thinking about? Are there, is everyone in the room a total rewards or an HR professional? Okay, so I see some hands and some no. But regardless, I think engagement at work kind of applies to us all. Yeah. Can you define that term total rewards for us? Yeah, so total rewards, I think in the common vernacular, I think people who are actually total rewards experts feel free to jump in. But I think it's a more sophisticated way of thinking about human resources. So how do you think about total reward in terms of your workforce? How are you compensating them? How are you thinking about compensation very broad? So it's a relabeling of HR? I don't know if I would, yeah, I think it's more from an evolution, I would say. An evolution of HR. Would people agree with that?
It's more related compensation and that.
Yeah. Yes, value proposition, great. Okay, well, feel free to jump into if other things occur to you. So one of the things I have sort of recognized on this landscape, largely because of what my clients are telling me, is that technology is radically changing the way that people do business and employees engage with their organization, right? I think that's crystal clear to all of us. So here's some, I just think, some interesting statistics. So the most in-demand jobs didn't even exist 10 years ago. 65% of school children's jobs today don't even exist yet. And by 2040, computers will require more energy than we currently have at our disposal today. Not just computing power alone, right? So it's crystal clear that technology is fundamentally revolutionizing this landscape. It is an exciting time, but it is also a difficult time, right? Because if you look at research about how engaged employees are in the workforce, depending on what survey you look at, 25 to 50, sometimes even upwards of 50% of workers are disengaged at work. That's an obvious problem, okay? 90% of leaders see this as an obvious problem. But what I think is the most interesting is that only a minority of leadership has a strategy to address this. Okay? And part of this reason is because what people are now asking for from their workplaces, a culture of listening, right? Meaning, purpose, fulfillment. Okay? Sometimes it's hard to even get that in our personal lives, and now you have workers saying, I want to get this from my boss, I want to get this from my workspace, right? So I think it's pretty safe to say that there are challenges and we're struggling to get our footing in this work environment. I think if we are going to be honest about it, part of the reason that we are struggling is because people are uncomfortable talking about issues relating to human desire and the human spirit. What strikes me most profoundly is that on one hand, the workplace is absolutely becoming more automated and more tech-driven. But on the other hand, at the exact same time, the workspace, what we most want from our employees, is becoming more deeply human, right? So innovation, collaboration, the ability to navigate human relationships and all their complexity. These things that we are asking our workers for are essentially human. And I say they're essentially human because they map on to the most unique parts of the human brain. I think there's also this kind of collective realization that rationalism is only part of the solution. Okay? So is there anyone in this room here today that thinks that the only reason that explains why people work the job they do is because of economics? Because of payola.
And on the job.
You think?
I think there were times in my life when I got a job, because I needed the money.
Sure. Would you say with the categorized, I mean, there's always outliers and there's always extreme cases. The statistician in me is always interested in finding the true factors. So I think overwhelmingly, if there's a complex calculus that goes into why people work the jobs they do, right? And I think that thankfully, most of us recognize that these rational economic models of behavior don't work. And we know this because there's copious amounts of science that tell us they don't work. And the reason they don't work is because the human brain is not a rational device. And part of the reason I'm excited to kind of be doing this work at this time is now organizations are starting to ask different questions about the human brain, about meaning, about connection, about non-traditional motivators. And as I think, or at least I hope that you'll see in this presentation, is that the neuroscience really is on our side. So today, one of the things that people typically ask me to talk about is motivation, transparency, and relationships. So I'm going to kind of try to do somewhat of a deep dive on each of these three issues so you have a better understanding of these three topics and how the brain relates. But in order to do justice to this topic, I really want to take a second to set the stage right. So I'm going to set the stage with one point that I kind of hope forms a good backdrop through which you can think about all the issues I'll be talking about today, and then maybe even think about it as you return to your own workspace or even your life in general. So here we go. What do you think is your organization's most valuable resource? Six people? Yeah. Any other answers? I do get different answers. Sometimes people will say like IP, especially with like a tech company. So I think certainly that the psychologist in me says people, but the neuropsychologist in me says attention. That your most valuable resource is the human ability to pay attention. So we're going to spend a little bit of our attention thinking about attention. And oddly enough, we're going to begin with the attention span of a goldfish. So believe it or not, God bless them, there's people who are goldfish researchers. What do you think the average attention span is of a goldfish? Go ahead and throw out the number.
3 seconds.
2 seconds, 3 seconds, a millisecond. Well, you guys don't have much faith in the goldfish. I swear to God, they would be like 10 minutes. Okay, so the average attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. What do you think the average attention span is of a human being? 20 minutes. That's a lot of things. Okay. 7 minutes. 7 minutes or seconds? 7 minutes. Wow. Okay.
It's less than 30 seconds.
Yeah, we're definitely in the second. So let me tell you, I got bad news. Good news for the goldfish, bad news for us. The average span of human attention is about 8 seconds. Can I answer that? Sure.
That's puzzling to me because there's lots of situations in which we watch a movie and we pay attention for an hour.
Great point.
So what are we talking about?
I love the scientists, and it's really asking me to operationalize my term. So this refers to what we call a natural attention span. So we're kind of unfettered, we're just kind of like daydreaming or we're doing something, how long will we hold our attention on any fixed task before we'll pick our head up, look out the window, check our phone? Okay, so the natural attention span is 8 seconds. And the takeaway here is that, and I think it's a pretty significant and a pretty severe one. This study was actually done by Microsoft, so I always think it's very interesting that Microsoft kind of releases this information. And it was done in 2015. In 2012, that same natural attention span was 12 seconds. Okay? So 12 seconds in 2012, 8 seconds in 2015. I don't know what it is today, but what would we guess? Exactly. So, and what do we think attributes to most of this attentional decline? Absolutely. Our constant interfacing with technology, or interfacing in such a way, to your point, we're not reading one phenomenal article for 1 hour. We're looking at this, I'm looking at this, I'm sending a voicemail, responding to an email, okay? So what I want you to understand from this is that attention is incredibly powerful, but it's also, it's very fragile, kind of can shatter very easily. The reason that this is important for people who are leaders, thinking about the management of people, is that talent management or leadership in general relies predicated on attention, right? If you think about what talent management is, the act of attracting talent, retaining talent, satisfying talent, all of that is engagement. And if you think about it, engagement is a synonym for attention, okay? So I don't think it's an overstatement at all to say attention is the bedrock of engagement in our jobs, in our lives, in our marriages, etc. So what I want you to leave from saying, because I do think there's a lot of great conversations about people and what they bring to organizations, but there is this missing discussion about attention as a resource. So I want you to kind of recognize that attention, quite literally, is a power source of our conscious life, right? So I want you to think of it as a current, and it quite literally is sort of this electrochemical current. And where you direct that current, what you are attending to, will determine what switches get turned on in your brain and what switches get turned off in your brain, okay? As a neuropsychologist, I say that attention is the mother of all thinking domains. It is the mother of all other neurocognitive domains. Because how can I write that report? How can I close that deal? How can I even remember if I wasn't paying attention in the first place? I have a lot of patients that will come see me and say, they're young, they're 40s, 50s, and say, I'm pretty sure that I'm dementing because I can't remember anything. And when you do this really extensive battery outlet, there's nothing wrong with sort of the memory structures in their brain. It's how they're attending to even encode that information in the first place. Okay, so I want you to just kind of think about attention as a precious resource and see what that kind of brings up for you as we go through the rest of the presentation. So a lot of times people will ask me, how do I get my employees to be more engaged? Which is a great question, but I think it's a precursor. The more fundamental question is, what are people paying attention to and how do we know? How do you know? So that wasn't that rhetorical, probably something rhetorical, but what's going on in your organization? And I hope that this feels like a safe enough space that you can say things that are working well or things that aren't working well. So how are you thinking about employee attention? Any ideas? Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you doing it once a year or are you checking in? How's it structured? Okay. And how is the employee receiving that feedback? Is it through their manager? Is it through a report? Okay. Yep. And have you been pretty happy with it? Do you think it's a good way to think about? Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like the example, oh, go ahead, please.
No, I'll take a different tack. I think that kind of attention requires some effort. Remember what your annual or goals are. I think in our environment today, we're paying attention to the cost of the reaction. The action that comes becomes, from a great perspective, the most important thing to attend to. What my boss asked.
Uh-huh. Are you saying that's a good way to structure the work environment or?
And, it's the reality of what people.
Sure, sure. And then I think what you were saying describes what I think we all relate to this, a real kind of, if you think about what the brain is doing, it becomes very reactive and very vigilant. So if you think about the attention, it can't go deep, it can't do the deep work, it's just kind of scanning.
One of the other things, that was a great list, and then the other thing I would add on to it, like I work with a lot of sales and marketing leaders and their teams. They pay attention to what's going to pay them the most. And sometimes it's, you have to really watch your pay plan because it may not be in alignment with what you want from an organizational perspective, but they will figure out what is going to make you the most money, and that is what.
Awesome, and that really gets on sort of extrinsic motivators, which we're gonna talk about later. Do people do, oh, go ahead, please. Because they're trying to figure out how it's integrated with their kind of, their goals, their sense of purpose, their meaning. Okay. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of information out about millennials now, just saying like, how does this kind of fit in this narrative about my agency and sort of my professional development, which, yeah. Go ahead.
I just want to comment, there are powerful technological tools to directly observe what your people are paying attention to. By looking at their emails and other technological footprints that they are leaving, you can figure out how much time during the day they're spending shopping on Amazon. As opposed to.
And is that something that your workforce or your work environment does? Or?
No, not in my environment, no. I did many of them.
Okay.
But I'm going to conferences for it. Very clear that experimentation.
Absolutely. And that kind of gets into sort of, when we talking about transparency, not that, because that reminds me of transparency and sort of privacy. So what things do we need to do? Without people watching and do people do climate surveys? Yeah, and how do you use those results? How do they actually, or you just collect the data?
Well, so it rolls out to leadership of groups.
Okay.
Usually that people are.
Yeah, because a lot of times people have really well intentions, they'll do the climate survey, but then it's not really being changed. All right, I'm gonna keep, oh, go ahead.
My reaction to this question was, I feel that to just be these threats and things. So, boundaries, suffers, closure, clarity, alignment, all that suffers.
Right.
How I'm responding to this, I think, documentation focus. Documentation. 6 to 12 months from now, that water cooler conversation with me is going to be a lot less valuable than having a document that we had some collaboration and agreement. And so, but that's incredibly unpopular. So people love documentation because something else breaks it. So anyway, that was my reaction to this question. It's multitasking.
Multitasking, I like that. That's okay. So let's see. We're gonna come back to some of these themes that you'll see. So again, that was kind of setting the stage. Now let's get into motivation, transparency, and relationship. So motivation in the brain, okay? Do we run around saying, I'm thinking motivated, I'm thinking very motivated today? No, we say, I feel motivated, I'm feeling very motivated today. So one thing, we're not gonna go into this too much, but you have one brain, but I want you to think of kind of having two distinct brains inside that one skull. An intellectual brain and an emotional brain. So even, I think there's this very beautiful relationship between language and biology. So just by saying, I feel motivated, your brain is saying there's something that maps much more out this emotional circuitry than this cognitive circuitry. Now, as a neuropsychologist, I spend, I would say, upwards of 90% of my time thinking about how to motivate behavioral change. And frankly, it's some of the most overlearned and resistant to change parts of our lives, right? There's a lot of my colleagues who are out there studying motivation too, a lot of really sophisticated definitions for motivation. So here's my definition, it's very complex, are you ready for it? What makes people go? Okay, that's all we really need to know about motivation. And there are two ways, and only two ways, to make people go. You either threaten them or you reward them. Okay? You are either moving toward the thing or you are moving away from the thing. And the third option is I'm just sitting here, right? Which is not motivating. It's not motivation, which isn't bad. What do you think is more motivating? Pounds or pounds? Threat or reward? Pounds or pounds? Oh, that's interesting. I hear a mix. Okay, all things being equal, it's absolutely threat. Because as much as I want that cheese, okay, if I'm flat down in pavement, that cheese does not matter to me. It's immaterial. And you're going to see your brain is much more wired for interpretation of threat than it is for interpretation of reward. So because of this, I do my work with organizations and companies. I'll often begin, let's begin with a threat assessment. And when I say that, I always get a lot of different reactions. And I always like that feedback because it kind of gives me a pulse for where the organization is at. So recently, a client said to me, I don't think that makes a ton of sense because we're not a punitive organization. Management is really well intentioned and we want to make people feel comfortable, which is great. That's exactly what we want. But what I think that this misses, and frankly, people miss this point all the time, and as you're about to see, the brain is very, very sensitive to potential threat, which is wildly different than overt punishment and overt danger. Okay? Go ahead.
Where do you,
It is, and we're actually, look at this. Spoiler alert, we're going to get to a whole module on intrinsic motivation, so let's pull that up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about threat. So in neuroscience, we use the term threat very specifically. We sort of use it and it's commonly used in the vernacular. We're talking about very specific regions of the brain and structures of the brain that are activated when we experience threat. I've come up with this little heuristic for presentation like these. The 4 A's. Anytime in your life you are feeling anxious, angry, agitated, or afraid, it is activating these threat circuits in your brain. Okay? So think about what that actually maps onto in your life. Job reorganization, evaluation, uncomfortable feedback from my boss, from my peer, from my spouse, financial stress, deadlines, stress. Lydia, you and I were just having this conversation, right? The key piece here is that it is powered immediately and unconsciously by this very deep brain emotional circuitry, okay? We can never underestimate the salient of potential threat because what this means is anytime your brain perceives unconsciously and immediately that there's a potential threat, it's going to siphon a finite attentional resource. Every day you wake up with 100% of your attentional resources for that day in that cup. How you're going to drink that water or eat those pieces of pizza are sort of up to you, but when they are finite. So that's a real sort of point I wanted to leave here. Now, I hope that you'll kind of let me wax a little bit philosophical. The more I do research into sort of threat and reward, the more I am convinced that this is the bullshit. This is the fundamental driver or conceptualization of human behavior. Because everything can be reduced to this framework, right? There's certain other ways to look at it too. I don't mean to apply it to the unilateral thing, but the way I engage on social media, if I pay my taxes, the risks I'm willing to take, personally, the risks I'm willing to take at home, okay? And I feel so sort of sure about this now that when I stand before God at the end of my life, and if I'm given the shot to ask one question, here's my one question. I say, why did you make it so easy to be afraid? And the reason I'm asked this question is because it has everything to do with how we are wired. This baby, hours old, is doing a reflex. Does anybody know the name of this reflex? Startup or moral, okay? So let me ask you something. When you came into this world and you were about 6 hours old, did you know what you wanted to do with your life? What kind of career trajectory you wanted? You know what it meant to be a good person? You know how to speak or walk or toilet yourself? No, right? We don't have to do a single thing to learn how to be afraid. The moral, the startle response is a reaction to fear. And if you think about the biological design, we're a newborn, we are incredibly feeble, we are under-resourced. And yet that very primitive, very feeble design said, I'm going to devote out of my very finite resources enough resources to sustain this reaction. What I think is even more interesting is it tells us something implicitly about the world. It says the world is supposed to be dangerous. The world is supposed to, on some level, be scary. The reason this is the case is because of lower brain function, brain status are involved. I've had this over today. One brain structure we're going to talk about today, the amygdala. Okay, has everyone at least heard this term before? Okay, so the amygdala, remember how I talked about sort of your intellectual brain and your emotional brain? You can see that these structures are bilateral, so they're deep inside the brain, one in each hemisphere. And you can think of it, if you don't like to use the term amygdala, you can think of it as the boss of your stress system, because it has everything to do with your stress response. We know a lot. There's a lot in brain science that we don't know. We know a ton about the amygdala, and we know a ton about it from animal studies, and we know about it from human studies. I'm a human researcher, and I don't do basic science. But we have learned a lot from lower species. So for example, when you take mice, here's another interesting thing. When little baby mice come into the world, I don't know how this is true, but they already know how to be afraid of cats. Okay? They have that implicit knowledge. So when the scientists go in and lesion and destroy those parts of the brain, and you gotta take out whole structures, right? Because the brain is neuroplastic to rewire itself. Those little baby mice, never the best friends with the cat. Walking around the cat, walking over the mouth of the cat. How do you think that happens for those horrible guys, right? So with humans, we obviously for ethical reasons won't go in and destroy brain structures, but there's some very rare medical conditions. So there's a woman who goes by the name of SM. She said that she had no fear response. She's not afraid of anything. So of course researchers are like, oh, come into my lab, right? So we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but humans are terrible reporters of their own behavior. So if you tell me you're not afraid, I say, you know, that's meaningful, but I want a lot of data to have it convert. So tell me what your self-report is, but then I'm going to look you up, I'm going to look at your heart rate, I'm going to look at your pupil dilation, I'm going to look at how much your skin is sweating. So if you learn to shock or there's all these scary things are nothing, flat. But even more compellingly, this woman has been in a number of very, very threatening situations in her own life. So she's been held up at knife point, held up at gunpoint, she's been in domestic violence altercations where she's been beaten within an inch of her life. But wait for it, not even disturbed a little bit. The reason she goes by SM is because you can see how vulnerable she is. She cannot learn, right? The fear structures aren't there to encode that fear learning. So she keeps putting herself in these dangerous situations. I am also so sure that it's just the loss of your stress system because other emotional responses, happiness, surprise, sadness, joy, there's no impairment there. So what I'm telling you is that this thing, these two things rather, have a very specific job and they do their job very well, right? So what does this mean to people who are thinking about their staff, they're thinking about motivating people? It means that threat leads to disengagement, right? And we see this on a variety of indices, lower cognitive output, greater burnout, greater absenteeism. In the brain is a very efficient device. If you think about how much space you have here, it weighs about 2 pounds, that's it. And it shows every facet. So it's kind of like there's things in the brain that serve multiple functions, right? Like this thing does a little bit of this, and a little bit of this. The amygdala has one job, okay? So what the biology says, we are so committed to this thing, we're gonna put one at each hemisphere, and that's all that you're gonna do all day long. You better believe that that thing is very good at its job, okay? So what does this mean to people who are thinking about leadership? It means that people are paying attention to subtle things and ambiguous things, sometimes even neutral things, sometimes even positive things. And all things being equal, they're pulling this towards threatening interpretation. This is why when I'm at home and I hear the floorboards creak, I'm not like, oh, it's just a house down. And I'm like, oh my God, we finally come together, right? Now, full disclosure, I do watch a lot of Dateline, so I'm pretty sure something matter of time murders me, right? It's on the husband. But, my point here is that even with ambiguous or subtle things, we can really experience them as threat. So what does this mean to you as leaders who are thinking about this sort of future of work? Well, it means, let's sort of think about what's on this landscape. We're asking for more flexibility, more risk, more complexity, more change, faster change, possible failure, more opinions, more room for rejection. Okay? At its best, it's at least uncertain, right? That's more uncertainty. And what have we just learned that the brain likes to do with uncertain information? It likes to convert it to threat. What do you guys like to think about this slide? Are there examples that you can sort of give from your own experience these days at the office? I haven't touched on it before. What are you going to say? Oh, I thought you were saying.
Oh, I kind of, so a lot of my clients, the more flexibility, I think is sort of an interesting one because it's good for them in many ways, right? Maybe they get to work from home.
Yeah.
Maybe they can sort of integrate their life and their work better and do things at the times that they want. But I also find it disconnects them from their social networks in the office space. And so they feel isolated, sort of out of the loop. And, in some ways, it's like I'm almost seeing a shift now, more people wanting to go back into the office to have that face time.
Absolutely. It reminded me of someone was kind of talking about the perils of multitasking. They sometimes we have so much freedom. So one thing I will say a lot is like vague is the enemy of the brain, right? So the brain doesn't want like too much. I can't really make heads or tails of this thing. How it causes sort of this uncertainty. So great example. Any others? Go ahead. Awesome example, and if we have time, I'll sort of like I can give you clinical examples of this. But what she's really talking about is things festering, right? So the longer the cancer kind of allowed to stay there, your brain has more time to ruminate on it. And again, now I have more time, less data, and so the interpretation is just it's going to be more and more pulled once again that threatening interpretation.
Yeah, Julie, I was just going to add on to that. In the absence of information and communication, go negative.
Absolutely.
Every time. You never think, I think this is going to be great. I'm just waiting for more information. It's, why aren't they telling us? There must be something really bad.
Yeah. And if you think about it, people kind of know this, they sort of beat themselves up about it. I like to inject a little bit of compassion and gentleness. Think about what your brain is trying to do. It's just trying to help you. It's just trying to say, oh, girl, this might end bad for you. So you better like get your ducks in a row and start thinking about how you can survive. Right? The problem is evolution is a brilliant thing, the brain is a brilliant thing, but we all certainly know it hasn't been perfectly effective for us. So what this means is your biology is much more invested in your survival than it is like, okay, it's Wednesday, do you feel good? You know what I mean? So it doesn't really see the value in that reward as much as it sees sort of the potential danger in that event. So I'm going to talk any other examples, because I love hearing what people are kind of grappling with.
I think I said if they even if they're targets, they're still reacting to this. So even if they might have diverse candidates or women at senior levels, they're still that
Wait, say a little bit more about that. So they hire for inclusion and diversity.
and promote for diversity and diversity, but I think there's still that response in when it comes down to the decision making of the instruction. So those voices still aren't being really
Interesting. So they're hired in a position, they're not being listened to. That kind of, I see sort of a connection between what you said earlier too. How to kind of really facilitate that genuine listening. So I'm going to give you an example that I have a lot of people ask me about these days. And it is about transparency and fairness, right? So this kind of backs on sort of inclusion. So we're going to talk about transparency and fairness. Obviously, transparency is a huge topic. I'm going to talk about it specifically as it relates to pay equity, pay fairness. It's getting a lot of attention these days, right? You hear a lot about it in the media, it's getting a lot of legislative attention, social media attention, and this is largely because technology and the internet has fundamentally altered the conversation about pay equity, right? So it turns out that when your mom told you to play fair, she was right. She was like a neuroscientist in her own right, okay? So we're about to sort of explore what can neuroscience tell us and why is this topic so attentionally salient to us? Why are we so concerned? Because a lot of times we're meeting our needs, right? Our house is okay, there's food on the table, but there's still something about this fairness and transparency piece where we get very hooked. Am I right? Yes. Okay. So what can neuroscience tell us about this? So we use a lot of design thinking, sort of the marriage between design thinking and neuroscience is a very natural one. So I'm going to take you through this framework pretty quickly today, because we only have a little bit of time, but I'm going to try to ask 3 questions and answer them. What is, right? So what's going on? What is, and then what works, right? And kind of really use sort of neuroscience to inform this process. So what is simply like, what does the landscape look like for you today? You know, I'm sure you have your own examples in your own head. I think the best way to talk about what is to use an example. Yeah, that's sort of the brain doesn't like big things. So I'm going to talk through an example. I bet parts of it will resonate. So I'm recently invited into a large global advisory firm, and they were having a lot of issues around trust and transparency, specifically around sort of pay and promotion. And this situation was exacerbated by these websites like Glassdoor.com, Salary.com, I feel like head nodding. There's a company internal internet feed, so I was telling, my coworkers how much I make. So in really broad strokes, junior level staff felt like they didn't feel good. They felt like they didn't understand what was going on. There was lots of cloud of suspicion. And senior management was like, we have everyone's best interest at heart. People need to trust us, and people also need to get back to work. Okay? So I don't think, it doesn't take much to figure out that this probably it did lead sort of an impact, right? So there's this breakdown between trust, communication, morale, engagement, because of people's attention. You think people are thinking about like how they're gonna, finish this big project. No, the retentional resources are like now what we call ruminating or perseverating on this point. Okay. The next question I say is, what if? And if this question works best when people are willing to suspend disbelief, right? We already kind of have this framework of what the brain knows. To kind of sort of stretch beyond that, sort of suspend disbelief and really engage creativity. And for me, if I kind of apply that to my own work, that to me requires me to say, what do we know about the brain? How can what we know about the brain really inform us creatively? And to be even more divergent in that thinking, let's not just talk about the human brain, let us talk about the brains of other species. Okay, why? Why would I do this? All right, if you see a trait or a behavior, and it exists not just in humans, but it exists in other species as well, I can promise that you will not eradicate it. Your best bet is not to try to pop that thing down, but how to figure out how to move with that energy that is coming at you. And this is kind of what I mean about the failure of these rational economic models of behavior. All right, so then what's that? Well, are there other species who are interested in fairness? Let's see.
So finally, that I want to mention to you is now a fairness study. And so this became a very famous study and is now many more because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys. And I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. That's now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees. But we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in the test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, cucumber is perfectly fine for them. And if you give the bark and grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped with this new monkeys who never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber knows that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. That's what she does. And she gets a grape. She eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now. Gets again cucumber. Yes, against the wall. She needs to get and she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Okay, so whatever you think of that video. What did you say? You work in your plan? Yeah. So I mean, I think it's interesting how we can take things out of our own sort of human context, watch another animal kind of exhibit it, and it can really resonate. So the question then is why, right? What's really going on here? So the number one thing that we need for survival, really when you boil it down to resources, right? Because I could say, wait, it's water. Well, I could get you gallons and gallons and gallons of water and nothing else. And obviously, we know how that would end, right? So here's sort of the key thing is that our sort of order in the tribe, in the hierarchy matters because implicitly, unconsciously, that deep brain is processing outside of conscious awareness. We're kind of running this calculus of how much access do I have to resources and how quickly can I get access to this, okay? So when we perceive, it doesn't mean we're actually being treated unfairly, that we are being treated unfairly, we now have the inability to pay attention to anything else, right? So I'm no longer able to collaborate with you. I'm certainly not motivated. I'm not thinking well. I'm not able to come to that meeting in the same sort of frame of mind. We attend to even subtle unfairness in ways that are irrational, okay? So again, this is now kind of more based or driven from the deep brain as opposed to kind of the effects on top. The reason I keep doing this, I don't have a hand puppet. So this, I'm just going to show you this. I didn't know I was going to go here, but I am. So this is your hand brain, okay? So this is your spinal cord, it comes up into the brain stem. This on top of our brain is the neocortex, where we do all our thinking and emotion regulation, problem solving, right? But underneath this is that kind of that subcortical area where you saw that with the amygdala, so kind of lives deep in the brain, it's older. So this is kind of why people will, once again, this language between biology and this relationship between biology and language. You know, people will say, I got so mad I was going to flip my lid. You can kind of feel it start to happen when your intellectual brain is like, no, girl, just calm down, breathe deeply. But then, like at some point, the emotional part comes out, and you kind of have this experience of disintegration. Okay, so that's what I keep having my hand called it. So let's sort of talk about these examples. I'm going to give another example from, we were brought into this organization that we see, this large international renowned organization, all these incredibly bright people. The organization was doing really well. We were actually there for another reason, but at the time that we were there, the organization was doing so well, they were hiring more people. So they needed more space. So management made this very rational decision, oh, we need more space. So without consultation, they moved people from their offices into cubes. Okay. You would have thought like there was a nuclear war on the premises because people could not talk about anything other than why they left their office and how come this dude's cube is bigger than my cube. So they certainly weren't working. They certainly weren't innovating. They certainly weren't problem solving. And all management kept saying was like, oh, like, you know, we're growing and we need to do this thing. So that's, I think, kind of, and they kind of know on some level, having a door, having ceiling tiles, does not make me a better program officer, right? But yeah, we kind of get stuck there. So that's an anecdotal example, but I want to give you also an empirical example. There's a lot of studies in this kind of corpus. I'm going to tell you one study. So imagine, what is your name? Yeah, Susan. Okay, so say that Susan and I are walking down the street together, and we see $100 on the ground, and it happens to all be in 20. So I'm like, oh, Susan, this is so cool. And I pick it up. I put $80 in my pocket, and I go, here you go, Susan, here's 20. How do you think Susan's going to feel about that? So unfair, right? But that's not rational. Because you have more than 4 seconds, you now have 100% more than you did 4 seconds ago. Study after study after study, people would rather walk away, whatever the reward is, actually monetary reward, or playing some silly computer game, we would rather walk away with nothing than walk away with something, well, okay, that we somehow been treated unfairly. Okay, so on some level, well, that is technically irrational. It's not rational behavior, but there's something incredibly fair about it because it maps very much onto our brain's processing resources. So let's go back to this conversation about pay. There used to be a lot more obscurity in the workplace. That's obvious. We didn't have these sites. That's where we're not calm all the time. Okay. So the issue is that now there is partial clarity. Glassdoor.com does not tell your full total reward. It doesn't sort of tell your whole value. It tells a portion of the story, right? So the questions that we should be asking now is, what is the brain doing now with partial clarity, uncertain information? Filling in those dots, and it's filling them in a way that Kim sort of mentioned is going to be kind of a negative interpretation, right? So this is why we're like, oh my God, I think that this program officer and organization who has nothing to do with the mission of my organization has a different, but I somehow now kind of making this connection that would be a good analog. Okay? So let's continue with this sort of what is divergent thinking. So one of the things I think is really important to do is to say what happens at the extremes of human behavior. So even if those extremes are obviously silly or obviously unethical, let's still go there. And then organizations can figure out based on the nature of the spirit of their organization where they want to land. So what if you say, okay, let's one extreme is a total black box approach. We're going to shut down the company internal internet feed. We're not going to tell anybody anything, right? So what's the obvious risk associated with that? Yeah, there will be a leak, and then suspicion will just be incredibly insidious. You will hear so people will talk about this sort of extreme so much, but people will talk about kind of radical transparency, giving people unfettered access to everything. That makes no sense from a neurocognitive perspective because the world is teeming with an impossible quantitative information. I already told you, you only get so many slices of attention on pizza that day. And actually what we know is when the brain's overwhelmed, it assumes a stress state will activate those states or threat now. So giving people access to all this information, people don't use it. And a perfect example of this is when you give people more kind of even retirement plans to select from. That becomes very overwhelming to them. And at a certain point, people will actually decline to participate rather than expend the energy to process that information, okay? So then it brings us to our third point is what works. Okay, so I just said like there's these extremes, we're having a conversation about transparency. I think that what works best based on the way the brain is wired is clarity. So really thinking about how are you thinking about uncertain information in your workplace, and then how can you even clarify that some more. This is a global study, and it seems like there's a ton of ground to travel here. So only 30% of employees are saying that they understand how their base salary is determined. That's actually a great question that we should all have an answer to, right? 50% understand how bonus is determined, and clarity, just as one predictor in the model, does matter, right? So we see that people who understand are about 45% engaged compared to if I don't understand, I'm only 15. So I only 15% are engaged. So this really kind of bears out in the numbers. Let's go even deeper in terms of the brain. Why is the brain doing this kind of with this whole uncertain information? Because I think it's easy to get busy and say, well, I don't want to do this whole kind of salary assessment and come up with all this information. But if you don't answer the question and you truly are interested in long-term sustained engagement, there's no way you're not going to get the brain of your employees to stop asking these questions, okay? And this is because the human brain is best thought of as a prediction machine. I think this is the most useful model, right? So all day long, we're in a world teeming with impossible quantity of information, and we're trying to figure out, which way do I go? How do I act in this situation? What things do I avoid? And we're basing all of this off historic information, right? So our history gives us context. And because of this, we can connect the dots. We can say, I know how this is going to go. And I think this is a beautiful, just really kind of cogent example. This is called the law of closure. And it will show you how well your brain connects the dots. There is no triangle here. Does anyone not see the triangle? Everybody sees the triangle. Because your brain's like, I'm gonna help you. That's a triangle. Look, I just made those lines there, okay? We also know now at this point in the presentation that your brain is much more wired for a negativity bias. This means when I have imperfect, uncertain, incomplete information, you couple that with a natural propensity for a negativity bias, and the answer is sort of threat activation, okay? So at this point in the presentation, I hope that it's very clear why the brain needs clear and coherent targets. So there's too much information, too little information, sort of just chunks of a narrative free-floating around. As soon as the brain understands that there's nothing behind door number one, right? There's no sort of like lurking threat, it can then start to attend to what's behind door number two and door number three, okay? There's one final point I wanted to make before we leave the transparency section, okay? Here's the funny thing about human behavior, and I was saying this earlier when we were talking about the amygdala. We're not that great at understanding our own. Humans are really poor reporters of their motivations, so of their moods, and of things that should even be objective, like memory performance, or how much sleep we actually have. And we either do this because we don't really understand what we want, or we're uncomfortable talking about the thing that we actually want. Okay? As uncomfortable as talking about pay can be, it's much more comfortable talking about that as a form of my meaning than talking about, my intrinsic value of the organization or my social connection. So this conversation about transparency, about pay though, especially in this future of work, needs to kind of draw on larger, someone said this earlier, I believe, it's kind of intrinsic motivators. And one of those intrinsic motivators is choice, okay? So choice, how you're thinking about choice in the workplace is very important. It's important sort of economically and functionally, but it's also important psychologically and neurobiologically. So obviously, we cannot, resources are finite, so we can't just keep giving pay increase after pay increase after pay increase. But here's the thing, even if you could, it wouldn't satisfy the brain. Because the brain has distinct networks that process extrinsic motivators like pay, and other distinct networks that process things like meaning and connection. So if you just keep throwing money, then it's sort of like if someone is really thirsty and you just keep offering them food, okay? One of the ways to tap into these internal, intrinsic motivation systems is to think about choice, right? When people have no choice, they respond to it, it causes threat activation. And we know that chronic choicelessness lowers engagement, right? So we certainly know that it affects mood, but we also see it lower cognitive output, which I think can be more surprising. So we actually see intellectual function across a lot of domains, attention, problem solving, memory, we see a decline. So this pay conversation is fundamentally about being satisfied. And based on how the brain is wired, we just can't be satisfied without choice. So I kind of wanted to open it up here and hear how are you thinking about choice? I know someone mentioned telecommuting, but I'm wondering, how you think about professional development, how you, I kind of call it movement, right? This sort of ability to express autonomy, in a variety of dynamic ways. How have you found that it is playing out successfully or even not successfully based on your work environment? Igor.
Good mind, style of performance. You can reach this one here in the first 30. I've already told it. You can't report to me for a press when you spread your wings. I'm trying to make him feel safe and confident, finding another place to go.
Okay.
So they do kind of graduating insurance.
Yes.
So I'm really trying to promote those bridge to river.
Yes.
So
Right. So you're there to facilitate it, that ultimately don't make the decision. Yeah. Any other examples?
Yeah, so there's a company that I was working with where if you were in sales, really the only sort of place to go after that was marketing. There wasn't, people couldn't see where they wanted to go. And so what we did was we actually created a career path with varying levels of if you accomplished this and been here so long this. And so they saw like I can go further up in my sales position, I can go into management, I can go into other areas of the company, and it created a really great visual as well as the steps and things they need to accomplish to get there. And that was very motivating to them because then it was, I don't feel stuck anymore now. I've got all these choices.
So one thing I want to just leave you with, and if people have a response to it, I would certainly love to hear it. I don't hear this one offered very often in these presentations, but if you think about why we get stressed out, particularly in performance-related scenarios, we feel like we have no choice but to succeed. So how do organizations really build a culture, especially when we're asking for, it's one thing if you have a very kind of manualized specific job, but if you're asking for innovation, which fundamentally relies on risk-taking and creativity, what is the culture around failure? Is that word even used occasionally in, so how are you thinking about, because You need that space, that sort of sense of spaciousness, both logistically, but also sort of psychologically. Okay, so that kind of brings us to the end of the threat section. So just really to summarize is that these neural networks that we're talking about here are about 200 million years old. So until we have brain hacking, and one of the labs I worked in was kind of interested in sort of AI and how it can affect or improve their performance, I can assure you we are a long way from that. That we really need to figure out how to work with these highly vigilant networks, as opposed to just insisting that the brain be something other than the brain is. But now I want to talk about reward as a motivator. So let me sort of say this, that we talked a lot about a very specific threat structure. There is no analog in your brain as sort of tight and powerful for sort of happiness, reward, etc. And what I meant about how the brain has a lot more real estate dedicated to threat processing. Something I mentioned this earlier, your brain, so how does your brain process reward? It processes it in two distinct ways. Extrinsic motivators, so that's things like pay and bonus and stock options, and intrinsic. So let's go through three scenarios quite quickly about extrinsic motivators. How does it shape the brain? So say I get an unexpected reward, a surprise spot, okay? So I'm Bob, I show up in my boss's office, my boss is like, Bob, you're doing phenomenally. I'm like, whoa, dopamine neurons, they play one key role in sort of pleasure, they start sort of firing. All right, so that's kind of how we know extrinsic reward makes the brain feel good. What happens when there's a non-delivery of expected reward? I think I'm going to get that 5% increase. I get that 2.5. Those same dopamine neurons that kind of have a baseline firing rate, they're actually inhibited from firing, which is why we have some lower mood associated when we don't get what we want. But I think sort of most commonly is what happens when we meet expectations. We think we're going to get the 5 and we get the 5, right? There is a bump. You get kind of a short bump, and I think we can all relate to this, but it's very short-lived. It does not sustain itself. So the question is, sort of what can you then do to make these extrinsic motivators more effective? One key piece is sort of the brain efficiency. Remember how I told you the brain is an efficiency device? The brain wants the simplest explanation between behavior and outcome, okay? So this is why if I do something well, it's important to really think about how you're rewarding your employees immediately. After a performance review, 6 months, 3 months, 1 year later, the brain just can't track that information to access those same emotional centers. This also, I'm sort of moving a little bit more quickly here, but I'm happy to answer more questions about this at the end. But this is also true with time. Your brain has a very curious relationship with time, a fascinating one. But we make a ton of errors in judgment, okay? So much evidence to substantiate this. So we think we did something one way, we think we performed better, but the objective output doesn't really support that. And that relationship, that belief, changes the more time there is between the event and the assessment. So how often are you thinking about rewarding? It's actually better to break down a big reward and deliver it sort of more often so the brain can kind of stay engaged in that way. The final takeaway here is that extrinsic motivators are awesome at attracting, but they're terrible at sustaining, okay? And they're terrible at sustaining motivation across a ton of studies. So we have paid people to lose weight, to quit smoking, to put on a seatbelt, to engage in acts of generosity. Not only do they not work, but we run those studies, we actually see that the behavior decreases. So there's something about extrinsic motivation that squelches intrinsic motivation. So just kind of being mindful that those two things have a tenuous relationship. I'm going to skip the habituator for now. And so I really want to talk about intrinsic motivation. So you have this other specific branch, oftentimes called the seeking system, that's related to curiosity, engagement, a lot of things that are very interesting to us. And there's two ways to kind of activate this intrinsic reward system in the brain. One is choice, which we touched on briefly, and the other one is social relationships. So social relationships are inherently and neurobiologically related. So I want to sort of talk about what neuroscience can tell us. We already kind of know that that's true, but what neuroscience can tell us about how we are wired and how strongly we're wired for this connection. I'm just going to start here. When you think all the way back to the beginning, what is the very first social behavior that humans demonstrate? Yeah. And I think that the better way to conceptualize the crying, because they're not just crying because they're bored, like they don't want to like work on their homework. You're crying and they're calling for social recognition. They're crying as a call for attention, right? So there we all were, screaming in the middle of the night for our mothers and our fathers to come help us. Even the word recognition, it means to give special notice or attention. So people are now starting to talk about how can we play with this intrinsic motivation system? How can we play with recognition in our workplaces? I want to show you this video because I think it just once again so elegantly and profoundly shows how much we are wired for social connection and social recognition.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. And the still face experiment that the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age. And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do. That's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions. They turn away. They feel the stress of it. They actually lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay, so I think there's some stuff that's sort of already a little bit self-evident, right? It's not sort of that much of a stretch to say, okay, fine, babies depart from this point of pure need. So we know that there's certain structures in the baby's brain that's really wired for that connection. So the question then becomes, well, where does that part of the brain go? Does it atrophy? Does it die off? What actually happens is as you start to build this more of the sort of neocortex, more and more cognitive abilities come online. Yes, okay, now I can make decisions and problem solve, but that fundamental part of the brain hasn't gone anywhere. So we know that this network is alive and well across the lifespan, and we actually know that social rejection, even really silly forms of social rejection, I'm just going to give you one example. When you take healthy adults and you have them play this silly game, you put them in a scanner, you have them play this silly ping pong game against the computer. They think they're playing against another human, and the computer stops playing ping pong with them. You know, that people's pain centers reliably act. And when you do it in sort of an interview with them afterwards and say, what was that experience like for you? Because the experiment is set up, like, oh, maybe the person's not going to want to play with you, they don't think you're a good ping pong player. People say, I felt really excluded, I felt rejected, I felt like I was doing something wrong. This is the healthiest of us doing a silly game in a laboratory, right? So we have a lot of evidence that rejection, exclusion, activate these pain centers. Also, they're the same points in the brain that are involved in physical pain. I just wanted you to know here that you have two very distinct networks, a pain network and a reward network. So thinking about social exclusion does not mean you're done thinking about social inclusion, right? There's sort of two layers of the brain that are processing that information. So the takeaways here are that the way that you're thinking about appreciation, the way that you're thinking about attention are incredibly powerful motivators. And so feeling like a valued team member is highly rewarding. And you know this because you've imaged people and the same reward structures that are involved in eating or drug behavior or receiving money are activated when we get these forms of praise or these forms of recognition. And so the takeaway is that appreciation is a fundamental human need, just like we talked about the need for safety. So what I was going to leave you with today is really being thoughtful about the psychological infrastructure that you're creating in your organization. We have no problems thinking about a lot of other infrastructure, project infrastructure, computer infrastructure, safety infrastructure, right? But what's so ironic is those infrastructures are driven solely by the cognitive parts of the brain, right? That sort of neocortex. If people are working in an environment that they don't feel safe, they don't feel appreciated, they feel threatened for whatever reason, your brain is a gatekeeper. It's not going to allow you to access those cognitive parts of the brain of your workforce in the same way. The takeaway here is just that we are connected in profound, automatic, and biological ways across the lifespan. And that connection can reliably turbocharge engagement in cost-effective ways. In a time of attentional distraction, what we see is that sincere appreciation can really cut through the noise because the brain is so wired, just like the brain is so wired for threat, very salient, the brain is wired for appreciation, okay? So we know that when we build this infrastructure, we see increased productivity, enhanced teamwork, lower turnover, better safety records, fewer accidents, and lower negative effects such as absenteeism and stress. So just the final takeaway here is to recognize that this psychological infrastructure can be built. All the time I hear people telling me, oh, people who are just gifted at giving feedback are just gifted. It's absolutely a skill that can be taught and we help teach people these things. So it's not magic, it's a skill that can be learned in training. So I think, these are just sample questions, but I think I'm just gonna sort of stay end here. I'm happy to stick around and answer questions, but I just want to say thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to talk now, or you're free to reach out to us as well. So thank you again.
Fantastic. I'm Kim Swoboda, and I'm the founder of Aspiration Catalyst, where we do leadership development, and I work with my clients to build high-performing teams. And I was taking copious notes this morning because all of this fits very, beautifully into the work that we do. So I am the co-chair of the Talent Development Forum, and so happy to be the co-sponsor of this event today. So I think this topic is so interesting in terms of how quickly technology is moving. In today's world, right? Everything is moving at a very rapid pace. And how do we make sure and keep the most important part of any business, people, at the forefront of our decision making? I think you gave us some great examples on why it's so important as well as how to do that. Some of my key takeaways today were, thinking about the threats that our people are under at any given time, anxious, angry, agitated, or afraid. How can we, right, recognize that when it's happening and then do something about it? And it was so interesting to me, like the absence of information when we were talking about that, where people go negative. And it made so much sense when you said, the brain is protecting you. It's looking for ways to, there's danger potentially coming. What are you going to do about it? How do you plan and prepare for that? So that was a great takeaway. The mother experiment, I'm not exactly sure how she did it because I was like, just reach out to her. Just go
Oh, react to it.
Yes.
So it's so wired for that.
Yes, it was so interesting. And so, obviously the social recognition piece for our employees is absolutely incredible. How do we make sure you're creating an environment of clarity and transparency and choice so that they can truly be engaged in their work and it's great about being there and what they're doing. So I would just like to, again, want to give a great big round of applause to them.
We left some feedback forms. We're very interested to know how we can make it more useful. Specific topics didn't cover, or we want more information as opposed to more sort of broad strokes. We really can kind of use that to help. Thank you.
Thank you. So please fill out those forms. There is more coffee and food back there, so please stick around for some networking. And I look forward to seeing you at the next forum. Thank you.
It's so good to see you everywhere.
Great meeting.
Hi, what do you do?